G'day and welcome to the 10th annual Andrew Olle Media Lecture. I'm Richard Glover from 702 ABC Sydney. Andrew Olle was our friend and our colleague, but he was also someone of national significance, a journalist's journalist who on television and on radio gave us all a lasting sense of what journalism could achieve. He was passionate yet balanced, empathetic yet tough-minded. He had this great sense of joy and fun, yet he was unafraid of being serious, dogged, even relentless when that was required. He worked with us on ABC local radio in Sydney, but that was only one part of a long career. It included This Day Tonight, Nationwide, A Big Country, Four Corners, the 7:30 Report. Many of those he worked with are in this room tonight, remembering their friend and thinking about journalism, what it is and what it could be. I'm talking about people like Kerry O'Brien, Peter Luck, Mike Carlton, Richard Carlton and Chris Masters, among many others. We thank you very much for being here tonight. It seems remarkable that this lecture is now in its 10th year and that it is now such a key fixture on the Australian media calendar. Andrew Olle died suddenly in 1995. He was in his prime. It was a terrible time. The ABC received thousands of notes of condolences. Tonight began very simply. It was an act of love, an act of respect felt and enacted by Andrew's friends and colleagues. He had to be remembered, they thought, and honoured. His sort of journalism had to be remembered and honoured. Over the 10 years, the speakers have included some of the most powerful and thoughtful people in the media. PBL's John Alexander, Eric Beecher, Seven's Kerry Stokes, Chris Anderson, and Lachlan Murdoch, that young man who has recently proved so bravely his independent spirit. Lachlan, I too turned my back on the family business. It's just mine was a news agency, not the actual newspapers in it. More important, perhaps, is the audience of all these great speakers, journalists young and old. On the 702 Drive Show, which I present in Sydney, we are regularly helped by interns, young people about to graduate who might spend a day a week with us. We have one at the moment. Her name is Nina Olle. I'm such a goose that on the first day I had to ask her if by chance she was related. I guess I didn't pay proper attention at all the other Olle dinners when Annette and her very impressive children were introduced. I don't want to embarrass Nina by saying too much about her skill and attitude and brains and chutzpah. Can I just say one little thing? Your father would be so proud of you. Tonight is a very special night for us. It's the 10th anniversary of the Andrew Olle Media Lecture, an event which remembers the great contribution to Australia's media by our friend and our colleague Andrew Olle. It hopes to honour Andrew, but also do more, to stimulate discussion of the media, its problems and its great opportunities. The other aim tonight is to raise money for the Andrew Olle Memorial Trust. And to talk about that trust and its work, could you please give a very warm welcome to Annette Olle.
Hello everybody, and on behalf of the Andrew Olle Memorial Trust, welcome and thank you for coming. It's 10 years in December since Andrew died from a brain tumour. As many would know, we established the Olle Trust soon after he died to raise money for research into brain tumours. So I'm very proud to say that under Andrew's name, we have now raised almost $500,000. Originally, the Trust provided funds for PhD students to do research. More recently, we've been supporting the work led by Professor Bruce Robinson. At Royal North Shore Hospital, where Andrew died, Professor Robinson has established the Australasian Brain Tumour Bank in conjunction with the Sydney Northern Oncology Group and with the Cure for Life Foundation. Regrettably, research into brain tumours is not considered sexy science. It's a little bit chicken and egg. There's little research because there's been little progress in treatment, and there's been little progress because there's been little research. The result of this has been that over the last 25 years, there's hardly been any change in the life expectancy of those unlucky enough to suffer from brain cancer. But, and it's a great but, in the last year, the researchers at the Tumour Bank have made enormous progress, more than even they imagined possible. Using state-of-the-art molecular science techniques, they have discovered new and novel genes involved in aggressive malignant tumours. Now, for the first time, researchers at the Tumour Bank believe they can distinguish with confidence a benign tumour from a malignant tumour and therefore tailor the treatment. This is a stunning development. The discovery of these genes will not only help us to understand the nature of the beast, but may also lead to better treatments and perhaps, just perhaps, one day even to a cure. At the end of this month, our research team will go to the University of California, where it will join forces with some of the best in the United States. We hope this will be the start of a successful collaborative project. The team leader, Dr. Kerry McDonald, is here tonight, table 25. And I know she'd be delighted to talk to you about the research in progress. And if there happen to be any journalists here, it's a really good story. Many thanks, of course, go to all those at the Trust who work for nothing but give everything, especially the Chairman, Robin Williams, the wonderful Sharon Carlton, our fundraising maestro, Maggie Drummond. And talking about fundraising, you'll notice the tenner for the 10th boxes on each table. Please allow the Andrew Olle Memorial Trust to continue its work by giving a tenner or two on this, its 10th anniversary. Enjoy the evening. And thank you. Now we're going to have a short tribute film from colleagues and friends.
We were very surprised to find that there was little research going on in brain cancer. And so we tried to raise some money, and we've been quite successful over the years, to get funds for research so that people can actually look into not just the cellular part, but even the epidemiology. In other words, why there are so many cases, surprising numbers of cases in Australia and around the world. And also to raise money for the brain bank, where we collect the tissues, which are then worked on by various scientists. And so over the 10 years, well, nearly 10 years, we've raised quite a few $1,000s.
We started collecting tumours into the brain bank over 2 years ago, and we now have over 250 brain tumours. The Andrew Olle Memorial Trust has been a great supporter of the calling in providing the initial seed funding for the formation of the bank, and also providing the initial funding for us to appoint the postdoctoral fellow, Kerry McDonald, who has been working on this project. These tumours have now become a very valuable resource in our search for the causes for those tumours, and also in helping us, hopefully in the future, to design new treatments and assess the efficacy or effectiveness of treatments for these tumours. One of the genetic devices that has been supported by the Andrew Olle Trust has been our foray into microarray technology. Microarrays are simply glass slides, microscope slides, onto which are dotted nearly 20,000 pieces of different genes. We're able to attach a piece of brain tumour to one of those microarray slides to work out which of those 20,000 genes is turned on and which of those 20,000 genes is turned off. And then, using computers, we're able to analyse the data and get a very good fingerprint of the inside of the tumour, the genetic changes that have occurred to cause that tumour to develop.
As a result of its being done in Australia, that brain cancer research people around the world took heart. I mean, even in America, they congratulated us on doing something that they felt was necessary because they didn't get enough support, and the fact that we were doing it meant that they felt, yes, there was a bit of movement. So I think that's been one of the most significant things we've done.
December the 12th, 2005 marks the 10th anniversary of the death of Andrew Olle. His was a brilliant journalistic career. Starting out as a cadet in the ABC's Queensland newsroom in 1967, he quickly moved on to This Day Tonight.
The police went up through the settlement and arrested a number of people. They brought about 10 of them down here to this little clearing in front of me and handcuffed them to the trees.
In 1976, he won a Logie for this story on abuse of police power in a coastal commune in Queensland. In defence of the injustice at Cedar Bay, he'd taken on the police, the armed forces and 2 governments.
There aren't that many reporters who come along who have a genuine sense of truth, a sort of a knack for getting to truth. And this is not something that comes because you're particularly gifted, or it's not some magical process. It occurs because you work hard. It occurs because you have an innate sense of fairness and balance. I think Andrew had that too.
All along, he had an interview style that was as gentle as it could be tough.
What does it do for you that you think might help?
Oh, stop me from remembering all the things that stress me.
What stops you getting depressed? Helps you stop getting depressed.
Agent Orange is the code name for a toxic spray combining 2,4,5-T with another defoliant.
On Nationwide in 1979, Olle's relentless examination of 2,4,5-T and its likely link with birth defects helped bring an end to the uncontrolled spraying of the chemical.
Well, I imagine you would have used quite an amount of 2,4,5-T in your time.
Yes, Andrew, we've used approximately 10,000 gallons this year.
Most Australians will remember him as the face of Four Corners. His persistent questioning frequently created a kind of primetime verbal dance with some of our more colourful leaders.
Does it worry you that this isn't going to be a fair contest, though, Sir Joe?
It worries me that you people don't seem to understand and not fair and not prepared to state the true case, as you never will. And your program particularly, of course, often seems to try and play it that way. So and I knew that before I came on the show.
Sure,
I'll try and educate you a little bit, Andrew, if you like.
Well, it's nice of you
to, as we go along.
Nice of you to bury your resentments and come on the program anyway, Sir Joe.
Yeah, it was.
Andrew Olle anchored many an election broadcast seamlessly and with great style.
And if I may offer you a parting thought, remember, whichever way you voted, the sun will come up again soon. Good night.
Apart from a 3-year sabbatical on Nine's Sunday program, Olle's entire working life was the ABC. In 1987, he began working at 2BL Sydney, now 702 ABC. His popularity saw his initial half-hour morning shift develop into an hour and a half, as he continued to build his reputation as a first-rate journalist.
Andrew was a man with such a flexible mind, and he was someone who was very agile and could turn on a 5-cent piece in the middle of an interview, or could take whatever you threw at him really quickly and completely change the direction that the show would take in. Or if something changed or dropped out, he would adapt very quickly. He was enormously able to take advantage of the moment.
Through television and radio, many Australians made Andrew a part of their daily lives, and his death at 47 brought thousands of tributes and sympathy from all over Australia.
John Doyle is one of those very annoying people who is good at just about everything he does. On 702 ABC Sydney, he presented for some years the afternoon show, proving himself a great journalist, especially adept at longer interviews when he let his curiosity take hold, and it could take the guest and the audience and John anywhere and everywhere. He is, of course, one of Australia's most noted humorists as the Roy Half of the Roy and HG duo, who conquered Triple J, ABC TV, Channel 7, and then ABC TV once more. And somewhere along the way, I think it was during the Sydney Olympics, converted the whole world to their great mad minds. If that's not enough, he has also written a couple of the best TV dramas this country has ever seen, Changi and Marking Time. They are really remarkable achievements, both of them. If you miss them, they are now available at an ABC shop near you. Go on, buy them. We need the money. John is a contributor to the media in this very eclectic way, marked only really by this amazing mind of his. He's also a constant consumer of the media. I can think of no better person to present the 10th annual Andrew Olle Media Lecture. Will you please welcome our friend and colleague, John Doyle.
What a privilege it is to speak on this occasion. If for no other reason than to be able to drag out the club buggery suit. This one last saw the light of day in 1997. It still fits, oddly enough. It was during the bombing of Baghdad that I reeled in shock, awe and disbelief when I saw Fox News coverage. Two immaculately dressed presenters were genuinely excited by the pictures they were seeing. One of them shouted, "I want to see the Moab," the mother of all bombs. "Bring on the Moab." And I thought, it's come to this. The news had degenerated into watching people wank at a snuff film. They were the new type of journalists. The fact is, rarely has there been a more important time for truth in journalism. I should begin by putting my journalistic credentials on the table. I have none. As a radio presenter, I once managed to conduct quite a long interview with John Howard, who was then a shadow minister in the Downer shadow cabinet, and covered a lot of ground without extracting any indication one way or the other that a leadership challenge was on. Whichever corner I tried to box him into, he deftly changed from a solid to a gas, only to reappear as something that seemed solid on another part of the canvas, with me clumsily smoting the air. Within a few days, he was opposition leader. Within 12 months or so, Prime Minister. And, on paper, the most successful one in living memory. As a television presenter, I had quite a productive, if fun-focused interview with the then Deputy Prime Minister, Tim Fisher, in which we extensively canvassed his future and the future of the National Party. Within an hour of finishing the interview, he announced his resignation and retirement. It was nothing to do with the interview. It's clear that while we were talking, he knew what he was going to do, but all I could wheedle out of him was that it was steady as she goes. Again, a no contest. In short, I've been thrashed by both champions and plotters. And the boxing metaphor is apt. The media is charged with aggression. Newspapers battle newspapers, radio stations spit at each other, and the television networks hate each other's guts. And journalists joust with politicians, and journalists claw at each other, and politicians, even on the same side of the street, do likewise. It's a cold, cold-hearted world out there. Look at the way Mark Latham treated his Labor family. Look at the way the Liberal family treated John Brogden. To state a truism, politicians and journalists need each other, feed each other, and form marriages of convenience. I remember working with a high-profile journalist on a commercial network a few years ago who stated that his ambition was to work as Peter Costello's press secretary when he assumes the Prime Ministership. His newspaper column has been nothing but full of praise for the Treasurer ever since. As a means of preparation for tonight, I I had another look at some really engaging lectures delivered on previous occasions in this forum by some pretty heavy hitters in the industry, and there have been some outstanding insights into the media. Kerry Stokes talked of the need for different voices, different perspectives and diversity of opinion, and how vital this was for the health of the media and therefore the health of democracy itself. I noticed that this year has seen Seven's Today Tonight and Nine's A Current Affair put to air the same story at the same time on the same night. As nearly as I can tell, the programmes are the same. Same old foot in the same old door philosophy, same mock outrage at feuding neighbours, and a total dependence on losers, or sad losers, or violent losers, or losers ripped off by shonky gold-toothed rat-type losers. They now make the ABC's brilliant 90s fast frontline look less like parody and more like reality television. Both current affairs shows depict a world where it's not only not safe for anyone to leave their home, it's not safe to live. And the commercial news services are carbon copies of each other as well. If one uses a blue background, the other will follow. If one uses a cityscape as a backdrop, the other will follow. Testament to the superficial nature of news as news is seen in whatever happened to Jim Whaley. Jim had been groomed to follow Brian Henderson, the former host of Bandstand. But it began to go wobbly when people started to watch Nine's Ian Ross over on 7. It was decided Jim might have been scaring the viewers a bit, so they began moving the camera back, making Jim appear smaller and therefore seemingly less scary. But then Jim was disappearing altogether, and by that stage, it was too late. Enter Mark Ferguson, a bloke who looks about 19, who was then marketed as the man with the experience. Unlike Jim, apparently, who has, to my knowledge, been seen in the flak jacket more times than any bloke ever to read a bulletin. So forget diversity of opinion. It's out there in the margins. If you really want diversity, go to SBS and the ABC. Then I watched Jana Vent's excellent address, where she spoke candidly about the immense difficulties of providing quality popular journalism on any commercial network. And she was right. But in the end, you can take the girl out of Mary Magdalene's world for a time, but it's very hard to take the Mary Magdalene out of the girl completely. And then we had Jana usher Sam Chisholm into the Logies Hall of Fame, and suddenly Sam's back at 9, and while middle management now have to call him Mr. Chisholm and wear suits, Ray had to lose the suit and loosen the tie in promoting A Current Affair. It was to give people the impression Ray had been at it all day at the coalface, tracking down the spivs, the plastic surgeons and the weight loss miracles. The fact is, as Lachlan Murdoch pointed out in his address here, the media is a business, and if going low sells, then let's mine really low. Lachlan's remarkable thesis seemed to be that elite opinion is to be avoided at all cost. What is preferred is opinion that fuels nationalism, and profits made serve to improve the systems of delivery of information to consumers, colour printing and the like. What's overlooked is that in the end, delivery and delivery systems are meaningless. Content is all that matters. Rubbish is still rubbish, be it on an old 21-inch black and white HMV or in high definition through the digital set-top box. The Beatles and the Stones sounded pretty good through the crystal set attached to the iron frame of my bed as a 10-year-old. As for elites, well, it's best to encourage worship at the feet of sporting elites. For those who dabble in elite thought may well come to conclusions that are at odds with the prevailing wisdom within the culture of the organisation. And while on the one hand, the Murdoch organisation bleats on about its abhorrence of political correctness and the need to enshrine freedom of speech and opinion, on the other, when dealing with China, is quite sanguine about removing the BBC channel from its star service because the opinions expressed might upset the burghers of Beijing. But to give it its due, News Limited is digging its heels in regarding freedom of information laws and is supportive of its 2 journalists who are under threat of jail for not revealing their sources over a leaked government document. Maybe the time has come for a Bill of Rights. I think Yana is right, Lachlan is wrong, and Kerry seems to be living in a parallel universe. I come to this forum as a consumer of media and as someone who's been fortunate enough to sit a little on the inside and observe aspects of how it appears to work. At my first real job at the Small Arms Factory in Lithgow, closed now, unfortunately, I bought the Daily Mirror every afternoon on my way home. I used to savour the football and cricket think pieces from the likes of Phil Tressida and Ian Heads and Jeff Prenter. And they brought me up to speed with the notion of cliché. At the time, I had no idea that this would be my career-making preparation, allowing me to express moments of life in terms of a traditional softening up period, forwards stamping their authority on the match, players having either good hands or quick hands or both, being able to sell a dummy or sell a dump or both, being able to bundle people into touch with either a grass cutter or ball and all tackle, while second rowers hunted in packs or made busts up the middle, or the hard yards before creating something out of nothing and being able to score from anywhere on the paddock while you could throw a blanket over the defence. Players could have the ball on a string in a moment of individual brilliance or weave their magic in a desperate bid requiring courage and commitment in the trenches in a game played in 2 halves where both teams were a credit to themselves, with one player being an ornament to humanity in a match where the game was the ultimate winner. In 35 years, about the only new contributions are American ones. This rookie stepping up to the plate could end up a Hall of Famer at this level if he lifts the bar. Yet despite the tightly spin-doctored, homogenised responses of sports stars and commentators, there's still the odd surprise. Ray Warren suggesting at one stage that the ball popped up like a plume of molten lava. Or Benny Elias on SBS saying, well, it's just like comparing apples and apples. You can't do it. I've always loved radio. Mornings was Gary O'Callaghan and Sammy Sparrow until pop meant the 2SM good guys introduced the songs that would become the diary of adolescence. Many years later, what's changed? Talkback, that's all. Commercial radio now, AM. Bandwagon talkback, water cooler drivel as talkback thought starters, competitions, finance and weather, quizzes, traffic, more talkback, then an inflammatory lunatic with talkback. FM. Wacky clubs or crews, old music or a balance of old music with unthreatening new, competitions, requests, racy talkback with swearing and repetition. All programs are substantially written by the daily newspapers. Breakfast and mornings used to have a deal. Breakfast got the stories on the odd pages and mornings got the ones on the even pages. The quirky stories are good for the crews. Often they're survey-based. 4 out of every 10 Swedes prefer briefs to boxers. Come on, guys, what do you prefer? Give us a call. G'day, Brian. Love your show. I wear briefs, mate. The crew might ask blokes who freebag to phone in. One of the crew will have an insight. I always freebag in my trackies. You're wearing your trackies now. Bloody hell! Much hilarity, and that becomes a promo soundbite for the next month. And don't be scared to use the Melbourne chuckle. That's when everything is so funny you can hardly speak with laughter. Sadly, I've only caught John Burgess on radio once. The grab I heard was, and we're coming up to the bottom of the hour, so let's just ease our way through with a little Anne Murray. Perfect. Least forgivable is the program that begins with, why don't you just give me a call and tell me what's on your mind? It's dead air space with a host. As are TV shows like the Up Late Game Show on 10, which may be telling us what TV will be like down the track when the digital revolution gives us thousands of channels, all with nothing on them. For some reason or other, as an immediate response when first approached to speak at this occasion, I wrote down the word symmetry. This is the 10th Andrew Olle lecture. Like many, I can remember where I was and what I was up to when the shockingly sad news arrived. I last saw Andrew in the canteen at Gore Hill at lunchtime on a Thursday. We chatted in the sandwich queue. Not long before, he'd worked on a Four Corners special entitled What's Wrong with the Liberal Party? A program that ended with Andrew angrily railing at the panel of John Howard, Robert Hill and John Moore for being in denial. I talked about work, his work, and he wanted to talk about anything but work. He looked and was exhausted. He was doing mornings on 7:02 and the 7:30 report at night. He had every reason to be exhausted. Andrew was very generous to me when we were working at the same station. He always offered story ideas, wry observations, and encouragement. I did afternoons, and it was the only time of day, apart from midnight to dawn, when nobody seemed to give a bugger about what you did. There was no minute-by-minute scrutiny that breakfast in particular has to endure. One of the traps with radio is that it caresses the ego in the most dangerous manner imaginable. The first skill to leave is the ability to listen. When someone else is speaking, you're automatically forming your next thought. The long-term effect must be a specific type of narcissistic madness. The trade, in part, is about finding a performance mask that can be slipped on and can evenly disguise days of euphoria or despair. Andrew was helped on radio because we knew what he looked like. He had a natural elegance and an interesting mask that really exposed itself on television. He had a look of almost permanent skepticism brought about by the asymmetry of his face. Science tells us we're attracted to symmetry. Symmetry equals beauty equals biological success, so the argument goes. Yet there was Andrew, a sort of walking proof that the exception can also be true. I'd see him annually at the New South Wales Tennis Open at White City. Here he presented as a sort of Watto Bertie Wooster type, with attractive slacks and lemon sweater casually draped across the shoulder, with a picnic basket in the boot of the Audi parked on the lawn courtside. Yet in the background was this tearaway kiddie from Queensland who terrorised neighbourhoods and missed out on jail by the skin of his teeth. His mask of performance had obliterated this part of his life completely, as nearly as I could tell. But I never had a night on the tiles with Andrew, and I suspect a few good reds might have allowed a different spiritual genie out of the bottle, as is the case with many journalists. Journalists like a drink. Often to excess, it's an occupational health hazard. Robert Haupt became a regular commentator on my show. He had tremendous style and a mission to find truth. But there were days when Haupty would have had a long lunch, and then it was different. A rosy, warm smile can make for difficult radio. Then he learned Russian and went to Russia as a correspondent because he thought that's where it was all going to happen, and he was right. Many at a time at awards dues, I've gaped in awe as highly respected journos have slammed yet another one back and bayed at the moon, or thrown a glass in anger, or picked a fight. At the Walkleys, fistfights are part of the card. I suspect drink in the journalist's culture might have something to do with massive overexposure to the darker side of human nature. I've always enjoyed reasoned commentators. I loved the sturdy assuredness of Paul Murphy and now Mark Colvin. I lean forward when I hear Catherine McGrath or Fran Kelly in attack mode. I love Kerry O'Brien getting angry. I pull up a chair for any Chris Masters or Sally Neighbour Four Corners special. I flick the page to the Paul McGough article. It's the mixture of gravitas and style. As a family in the late 50s, we used to sit around the lounge room at night, letting Arch McCurdy guide us through Benny Golson or Oscar Peterson or Charlie Parker. A cigarette company sponsored him. It might have been Ardith. And with voice alone, he fashioned the smoky atmosphere of a New York jazz club. His live commercials for Ardith had him ignoring the copy, and the ad would sometimes be reduced to a pause, followed by the sound of a match being struck and an ecstatic draw. And that was it. Arch always struck a warm yet authoritative tone. He was a master of the medium, having the easy confidence of one who's made the time, the moment, his own. And he knew his subject and somehow gave the impression of having left the ego behind. John Cleary has a similarly elegant style. Andrew also, despite his particular asymmetry, had reasoned objective balance, which leads us to opinion. Suddenly the world is awash with opinion. Sadly, more Arch Tambakis than Arch McCurdy. Newspapers, too, are full of it. Any half-baked dickhead who can string a few sentences together is given a go, particularly if the opinion is inflammatory or somehow ratchets up the climate of fear or loathing, simply and obviously because it sells more newspapers. When I had a regular radio show, I was constantly astounded by the easy access to some of the great minds of our time. It seemed to me that radio had such portability and potential that there was no excuse just to throw the lines open. I had an American physicist called George Smoot on once. He helped discover cosmic background radiation, the echo of the Big Bang, the microwave image of which was given the title The Face of God. We pick it up as snow on our television sets. And he was talking about string theorists whose maths had rewound the tape of time to escape this universe and seriously postulate that the Big Bang was caused by a collision of two other universes in a cataclysmic event. He said the maths was pretty good. I thought, fair enough. Certainly the idea of other universes seemed redolent with possibility. Then I spoke with another American physicist, Robert Kirshner, who shrugged and said that in the end, a mathematical formula must have elegance to have truth. And to his mind, string theory still lacked elegance. And I've wondered in wonder about elegance in this context ever since. To me, the doctrinally unencumbered search for the big picture answers of where we came from, where we're going and how we might survive as a species are far more interesting, intriguing and satisfying and more revealing of truth than faith-based examinations that eschew-proof and lessen us as humans. While the echoes of the Big Bang provide the clues, the echoes of the Age of Enlightenment remind us that we are but the stuff of stars. I remember reading some years ago about the series Dallas being beamed into the New Guinea highlands. It was being viewed by mountain tribal people who were just a generation removed from first contact. People who'd had little or no connection with European society at all, apart from the odd Christian missionary. Tim Flannery recalls seeing a burial service in the Highlands whereby the deceased was picked up and swung over the grave with the family and onlookers solemnly chanting the incantation, "In the name of the Father and of the Son and into the Holy Ghost." What were they to make of Dallas? A highly camp-style, vacuous, rich oil family living the life of Riley in a bed-hopping, fun-filled, soap-operatic adventure laced with stylized irony. Probably the Highlanders saw it differently. A lifestyle that was heaven on earth, irresistible. Vast houses, huge cars, heated pools, money, booze, guns and loose women, and no morality to speak of. Ancient and modern cultural universes brushing against each other. Again, a cataclysmic event. The truth is that in the belly of any society there's a violent, brutal core that exposes itself when the thin veneer of culture is stripped away. The recent Hurricane Katrina in the Gulf of Mexico partially revealed the feral world that snuggles so closely within the first world. And there are websites that explain that the shape of the hurricane was that of a womb, and that while ever the US continues to allow abortion, God will rain such punishments down. Without doubt, there are other websites that suggest the shape is that of a bumhole and is a warning against the legalisation of gay marriage. And others suggesting this is simply Gaia attacking the oil industry. The fact is, New Orleans has been known to be a disaster waiting to happen for decades. Being in denial about global warming is to court certain disaster. And Tokyo is a disaster waiting to happen. The earthquake is already 250,000 years overdue, if the geologists are to be believed. Welcome to the age of infinite information. Small cataclysmic events are happening all the time at the speed of light. The internet allows anyone anywhere to access information that might be true, might be false, but you can find whatever information you need to prosecute any argument you want. Conspiracy theories abound. History can be written any way you wish. In the past, information bound culture. There was a shared sense of a gradually expanding library of sensible and responsible scholarship, whereas now information is serving more to fracture culture. The future of information is with bloggers. And who knows what the blogging implications might be of a generation aching for the steely coldness of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas and other games involving cyber murder or cyber torture and online sex and anonymous chat rooms and bomb-making instructions and clubs dedicated to nihilism and terrorism and all manner of misguided madnesses designed to accelerate rapture. The genie of limitless spin and unlimited market power has been unleashed. The result is to squeeze the commercial lemon shamelessly with a never-ending stream of services offered that come with a tacit, irresistible message of the promise of the good life. And somehow people spending 150% of what they earn makes for a robust economy. And then there's the promise of globalisation, which has still done little for the Asian sweatshop worker being paid 50 cents an hour to build the shoes for the golfer who's being paid $50 million a year to wear. Never before have we been aware of just how obscene has become the remuneration amongst our top company executives. 5 to 10 million a year seems to be unexceptional, whether successful or not, and nobody bats an eyelid. We're becoming a nation of acquisitors, special interest, real estate, and the stock market. Changi and Marking Time were written as companion pieces examining the Australian character, the sweet and sour journey towards the hardening of its heart. It's fitting that we're now exporting our homegrown Aussie version of Christianity to Europe that comes with the powerful message that Jesus wants us all to be millionaires. Paul Keating commented almost as an afterthought that without reconciliation, we're just here for the view. Speaking of which, it's amazing to think that reconciliation was so recently a part of mainstream public debate. Mention reconciliation now and there's a generation of Australians who haven't the least idea of what you're talking about. If it doesn't affect the economy, it's not on the radar. The economy is everywhere. Paul Keating made it pop. He was so successful at it that Peter Costello has modelled his parliamentary performance mask entirely on Paul Keating's. He is walking proof that imitation is the highest form of flattery. God almighty, the economy. It's assumed that everyone is now a shareholder. Everyone has a portfolio, many with those T2 shares just sitting there as a reminder of how close to gambling the stock market really is. But it is a source of celebrities. There's always someone from ComSec bobbing up in an audition piece on Channel 10's news, or Karen Cho on 9, or Alan Kohler on the ABC. And when it's budget time, Bill Evans or Saul Eslake. They're as predictable as Phil Koberberg appearing when the temperature reaches 34 degrees in summer. Then there's Koshy, who bears all the hallmarks of one having loomed out of the dismal science. Religion, too, has again become a source of celebrity. Archbishop George Pell is probably at the top of the tree, with the Jensens jockeying for position now. Peter Carnley has exited stage left, and the Reverend Dr. Gordon Moyes has become almost invisible. But bobbing up on the inside is Sheikh Al-Hilali, who came out of nowhere during the Doug Wood incident. Well, almost out of nowhere. There was an incident involving an unregistered vehicle and an unlicensed driver and some plumbing supplies that were protruding precariously from one of the windows. I don't know what the upshot was, I really don't. But the Mufti and Kaiser Trad have become Australia's Islamic odd couple. And if they seem a little like rabbits caught in the spotlight or appear to be treading on eggshells with their speech, bear in mind how difficult it is for anyone in the Muslim community to put their heads up in 21st century Australia. And the media doesn't help when it depicts, quite falsely, Australian youths of Arabic background supposedly claiming an unwillingness to ever integrate. Mercifully, some media does attempt to reveal truth. And if it wasn't for the excellent work done by Lateline this year with the ABC Investigations Unit, I doubt whether the Rao or Salon cases would have appeared at all on the radar. Let alone the exposing of what has been described as an overarching cultural problem within Dimia. And I think it's fair to say that in days gone by, in our Westminster system, any minister who oversaw such a rancid cultural climate within a department would have been expected without question as a minimum requirement to fall on his or her sword. It's not always so great for a society when God turns up. Reason is often the first thing jettisoned. Evolution is back on the agenda in the United States, which means here as well. Creationists want what they're calling intelligent design incorporated into the curriculum, and it's meant to be treated seriously. But it doesn't surprise me. Battles won in the past are having to be won again. And as long as within the media elite opinion is reviled, untested populist positions will prevail. I can only imagine what the cost was of the burning of Constantine's great library in Alexandria, so much knowledge of astronomy and maths and all manner of literature, history and art, universal truths that had to lie dormant until rediscovery by another purple patch of human intellectual endeavour. The sadness of today is that the truths are still with us, sitting side by side with uninformed nonsense. Do we need to revisit through individual work contracts the factory life of Dickens for collective bargaining to grow again? And while ever the media allows truth to be bended, moral battles are going to have to be re-won. Humans are not related to chimps. Astrology has answers. There's no connection between Iraq and the increase in terrorism. The earth is flat. The Holocaust never happened. To be born in poverty is your own fault. A society is safer when human rights are compromised. There's no such thing as greenhouse gases. Certain races are not as intelligent as others. And now there's terrorism. Will it become common, a sort of angry graffiti? It's complicated. The same political figures who today kiss the helm of Nelson Mandela in a time not so long ago were happy to see him rot forever on Robben Island. Saddam Hussein was the friend of the West and armed by the West in the war against Iran. Somalia and now Zimbabwe can go to hell in a handbasket because their lack of resources has no effect on the West. And there's the overarching issue of sustainability. To imagine that everyone on the planet can aspire to the lifestyle of J.R. Ewing at the cost of the global environment and the resources of other nations is to live in a fool's paradise. Arm poverty and ignorance with moral rectitude and hang on to your hats. We live in interesting times. If commercial radio is so slight because it's under-resourced, so too is television. And if more channels are allowed, then the resources will be even further stretched. As it is, the ABC has been cut to the marrow and can no longer afford to do much drama. And commercial networks have decided drama is too flaky and expensive. Meanwhile, our very fine drama schools are pumping out scores of new young actors each year, and there's nothing for them to do. The lucky ones might get to appear in a Beefeater barbecue commercial or survive for a season in the Bell Shakespeare Company. So our local content is reduced to game shows, dancing shows, lifestyle shows and talent quests, all creaking under the weight of diminishing returns. Think of something mindless, rope in a couple of celebrities, and there's your show. Big Brother is such a waste of an opportunity. The housemates live in a state of perpetual boredom unless they're pissed. Why not engage them? A house of really smart, gifted young people from various fields. Scientists, engineers, mathematicians, builders, a Latin scholar, a poet, etc. And they have a problem to solve. With a shared incentive of a few $1 million, they have to find a solution to Australia's water problems in 10 weeks. There's a show. To get on my hobby horse just for a moment. Because historically the ABC has been the powerhouse for new ideas that are often taken up by the commercial networks, perhaps the time has come for those networks to subsidise the ABC. After all, the ABC has been the training and testing ground for the commercial networks for 50 years. It's about time the situation was redressed. What I would propose is a tax-deductible levy on pre-tax network profit of around 25 to 30%. That's pooled exclusively for ABC drama. In return, the networks get second viewing rights and the right to franchise any series on a rotating basis that is deemed commercially viable. The fact is, it's only the ABC, by virtue of being unencumbered by what is popular, that is capable of taking risks. Why is there such a paucity of great locally made drama? Because the ABC isn't doing it. The Americans would hate such a plan and see it as not being in the spirit of the free trade agreement, but so what? This isn't cheese or rice we're talking about, it actually is culture. A fully funded ABC drama unit would be to the advantage of the commercial networks. The ABC could become Australia's HBO. So what's changed in the 10 years since Andrew left us? A Conservative Labor government has been replaced by a Conservative coalition government, and the organisation he worked for, the ABC, has had to steer through some pretty treacherous waters. ABC News and Current Affairs has somehow survived the Shire era and the petty, ideologically driven hounding by former Minister for Communications Richard Alston. The ABC still provides the best services in the country, the best news services in the country, and arguably services that could be described as being amongst the best in the world. Radio National is still impossibly excellent. ABC TV has too somehow managed to survive with its current affairs programs intact, loathed by Labor and coalition alike, as it should be. And as it should be, it still strives to put forward an alternative view, so that when the commercial media is dictated to by myopic, intrusive ownership and ill-informed populism, is forced through thoughtless need to make irresponsible programs that lack both style and substance, caresses inflammatory and cheap, nasty demagoguery that seeks to marginalise the already marginalised, that describes the world in simple terms, provides simple answers to complex problems, and is purely a servant to fiscal outcomes, then the ABC will always seem to aggravate, annoy and frustrate. And it's precisely when the ABC is doing this that it is serving its charter. It's preserving its sceptical, asymmetrical mask. Andrew missed out on seeing the events of September the 11th. A blunt cleaver that questioned Western certainty. One of the pilots of the first American Airlines plane to smash into the World Trade Center was Mohammed Atta. He spent his last hours on this earth in Las Vegas, roaming amongst the gambling dens and strip clubs, theoretically to further steel his resolve. Such was his loathing of the excesses of the West. The quest for our media is to ask why it happened and why it's continuing to happen, to understand the motivations of those who are willing to end their lives at a young age on the altar of sectarian anger, to join the dots between that state of mind and the mindset of those in the New Guinea highlands, cutting down their pristine forests to feed the generators that provide the power for the television to screen Buffy or the OC or Joe Millionaire, or if they're online, to power the modem to any cyber freak show the mouse takes them. If this examination isn't exacting and truthful and without fear or favour, then this universe's accidental experiment with self-awareness and consciousness may well have been a total waste of time. Thank you.
Well, how do you respond to an address such as the one we've just received? Other than to say, John, I really enjoyed it. Listening to what you've had to say tonight has just been tremendous for us. But some of the most stimulating Andrew Olle Memorial Lectures that I've heard have been those which deliberately did not limit themselves to discussing only the state of the media. You were also very open in expressing your inability, firstly as a radio presenter, and secondly as a television presenter, in extracting information from senior politicians. John, the ABC has similar frustrations. We can't get anything out of them either. At the same time, however, I must congratulate you on being the first Andrew Olle Media Lecturer, possibly the first person in history who's been able to link together string theory, the Age of Enlightenment, and Dallas being beamed to New Guinean Highlanders, all within a space of 60 seconds. But seriously, John, your address tonight touched on a number of thought-provoking issues, including the media industry, human rights and human suffering, exploitation, potential disasters, economic realism, religion, and of course the issue of terrorism. Naturally, I also appreciate your support for the ABC, and I've always thought that if ever there was a candidate for an Australian HBO, ABC TV would be it. At so many points in the last 73 years, through so many of our shared experiences, the story of our country has been told by ABC journalism through the work of people like Andrew Olle. But it has also been told through drama on ABC television, through programs and stories reflecting on who we are and where we have come from, our sense of national identity, as the ABC Charter itself describes it. As you suggest, John, if the ABC is unable to do this, who will? That might explain why I'm so taken with your idea of a tax-deductible levy on the commercial television networks, if I've understood you correctly. That could be devoted exclusively to ABC drama. So much so that while you were talking, I texted the Treasurer to set up a meeting for you. So if you hear a little beep from the pocket, I'm sure it'll be Peter texting me back. It's also good to know your loyalty to the ABC has endured. And if there's ever an opening in ABC local radio, say the breakfast slot on 702 perhaps, I'm sure Roger Summerall will keep you in mind. The hours aren't that bad, John. John, you also mentioned the lookalike news offered at 6 p.m. by some of our commercial television networks. Again, a reason why we continue to need the ABC and the distinctiveness and quality that it brings. And whatever happens within the commercial media, should our cross-media legislation change, which is a matter best left to the astrologers at the moment, it is essential that we have a strong and financially viable ABC, keeping the public adequately and appropriately informed. Finally, I was genuinely surprised to hear that the sporting commentators you heard in your youth had such an influence on you. I'm sure other people would find this hard to believe as well. However, I can relate to those times and our Aussie passion for sport. But I also remember some years ago, and I think it was about 1996, when I was on an airplane travelling from Sydney to Melbourne, reading an interview in the airline's in-flight magazine with a prominent team of sporting commentators. And this interview took place at one of those rare moments in Australian history, rare moment when there was controversy and concern about the role and the future of the ABC. Two national iconic sporting commentators, one Roy Slavin, the other H.G. Nelson, were asked what should be done about the ABC. They said from memory, "Get rid of it. It doesn't turn a dollar, does it? It's nothing but a breeding ground for communists." Thank goodness, John, sports announcers of that type were not the ones who influenced you, nor, I hope, do they influence the Treasurer. John, on behalf of the ABC and Ollie, thank you once again, and I ask you all to join me again in thanking John Doyle.